Everybody, sorry, facilitators, can I just ask every table just for attention, please? We're now in a position to declare the results of, sorry folks, can I ask everybody please, we're in a position now to declare the vote of the second ballot, and I'm going to ask Kieran again to come up and present the results of the ballot and the process we got through to get the result. Thanks, Kieran.
Yeah. Okay, this is the result of the ballot we took for the 4 different groups, and we're going to start with the question for cannabis, the vote. Now, a lot of figures on this, but I'll go through it. It's fairly straightforward. Once we get the first one out of the way, it'll be nice and easy. The column there for first count is the number of first preference votes each of the options got. So the number 10 under first count in option A, status quo, means 10 people gave their first preference vote, a number 1, to option A. If you look at the top right corner, you'll see the total votes cast was 87. We did have 88 this morning, but 1 member had to leave. We had 1 invalid paper, so we've a valid poll of 86. The quota in this case is literally just 50% plus 1. So it's half of 86, which is 43, plus 1 is 44. Any option that gets 44 votes has a majority. If it gets it on the first count, it's an overall majority first preference on the first count. Nobody did here. If you look down the first count column, we had 10 votes for option A, 8 for option B, health diversion, 23 for option C, comprehensive health led, 9 for option D, tolerance, and 36 for option E, legalization and regulation. At that stage, because no option has actually reached the quota or got a majority, the rules are that we eliminate the lowest of the options and we redistribute it. So we take option B, which has 8 votes, and we look at those 8 papers and we look for the second preferences on them. So on the column for second count, you'll see that on the second count, option A, status quo, received plus 3 votes, giving it a running total of 13. Option B receives minus 8, giving it a running total of 0 now. Option C received plus 2, giving it 25. And option D and E didn't get any. There's 1 extra line on the bottom which is non-transferable votes. You'll see this throughout all of them. All that means is that those 3 people didn't put a second preference on the paper. They only went for number 1. So we can't decide what their second preference was because they didn't give us one. So they sit there as 3 votes in the non-transferable column. At that stage, we still don't have a quota. Option E at that stage has 36 votes, which is the highest, but it's still short of the 44. We therefore take the 9 votes that option D has, which is now the lowest, and we divide those up on the third count. And of those 9, C got 7 and E got 2. At that stage, we're left with a 13, a 32 and a 38. So option A with 13 votes is eliminated. And of those 13, option C got 7 and 6 of them were non-transferable, didn't have another preference that we can go to. So this one has actually ended up as a very tight result. We now have 2 people left at this stage, or 2 used to people, 2 options left at this stage. Option C has 39 votes and option E has 38. Now, the rules are you eliminate the lowest, which is option E, albeit only by 1. But in fact, when you get to this stage, there's no point in even doing that, because when you eliminate the lowest, there's only 1 horse left in the race. This is exactly what happens at a national election when you'll hear on the news that a particular candidate was elected without reaching the quota. They didn't make it as far as the quota. The 39 is short of the 44, but there's nobody else left to run against them. There's only 1 other option, and when you eliminate that, there's only one left. So the consensus here, albeit by a small margin, is for cannabis, a comprehensive health-led option or approach is the consensus. Can we have the next slide? Sorry, does anybody want to query any of the explanation? I mean,
maybe finish.
Yeah, to finish, yeah.
Let's ask Kieran to finish and then we can take.
Yeah. So here's the same for option, for the option for, I'm going to call this DMT, etc., if you don't mind, just because I can't pronounce some of those. So again, we had 87 votes. We had 2 invalid papers in this, which gives us a valid poll of 85. The quota is slightly lower on this, therefore at 43. The status quo got 13 first preference, health diversion got 7, comprehensive health-led got 28, tolerance got 13, and legalisation and regulation got 24. So therefore, we eliminate the 7 votes for health diversion. That still didn't give us a quota on any of the options. At that stage, option C is in the lead with 30, but still well short of the 43. So we eliminate the 13 votes for option D, distribute their next preferences across the rest. That gave us a 36 for comprehensive health-led, 31 for legalisation, and 16 for the status quo. Again, there's no clear quota, so we eliminate the 16, which leaves us with 42 for the comprehensive health-led and 31 for the legalisation. So again, we're in a position of eliminating legalisation and regulation and comprehensive health-led, albeit by a bigger margin this time, but still not quite the quota. It's 1 vote short, is the consensus view. The next slide.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, it's up.
Yeah.
Now, on this one, we had 87, less 1 spoiled vote is 86, so our quota again is 44. The options for the first count were 19 for status quo, 11 for health diversion, 35 for comprehensive health-led approach, and 13 for tolerance, and 8 for legalisation. We eliminate the 8 for legalisation. Again, nobody has reached the quota. So when we distribute that, comprehensive health-led got 4 of the 8 and tolerance got the other 4. That leaves us with health diversion at 11 votes as the lowest remaining option. So we eliminate that. Of those 11, 3 go to the status quo, 4 go to the comprehensive health-led, and the remaining 4 don't have any other preference, so they go to non-transferable. We now have 43 for comprehensive health-led, 22 for status quo, 17 for tolerance. We eliminate the 17 for tolerance and redistribute those, and that gives us 22 for the status quo and 56 for the comprehensive health-led. It got 13 of the 17 votes. That means comprehensive health-led has easily at that stage exceeded the quota and is therefore the consensus option. And the final slide is for all other drugs, and this was even slightly shorter. Again, we had 2 spoiled votes on this, so the quota, the valid poll is 85, the quota is 43. We got 20 first preferences for status quo, 11 for health diversion, 38 for comprehensive health-led, 10 for tolerance, 6 for legalisation. We eliminate the 6 for legalisation and divide those up. That leaves us with comprehensive health-led in the lead with 39, and at the bottom of the list is health diversion at 11. So we divide those 11 up. That gives us +3 for status quo, giving it 23, +6 for comprehensive health-led, giving it 45, 0 added for tolerance, leaving it at 15. At this stage, comprehensive health-led has exceeded the quota. It's got 45 votes. So even if you add the 23 and the 15 together, you can't catch a 45. So comprehensive health-led on the third count gives us the result for all other drugs. Just to point out that this particular set of results has actually given you back the universal approach that we had the yes-no vote on. And I did mention on the discussion earlier that you could easily end up with that. You could easily have actually ended up with the status quo for everything on this. But at least you've now had the option to dive into it and do it in a little more subtle way than just a yes-no to one size fits all. So it's not by any means unusual when you go to individual votes like this that you actually end up with potentially an option you may have apparently discarded earlier, but that's the way you've ended up with it. Is that okay?
So the summary is the comprehensive-led approach across the board.
Across the board.
This is about the incident. So we just ask Karen to stay here, and we just, any kind of technical questions just in terms of the process? Jack, here, we can get a mic just up here.
I just wanted to ask about the non-transferable votes. Just, I guess, could you kind of elaborate a bit more about them and
Yes, sure.
the part that they play in all this?
Yeah. On any vote like this where you're ranking number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you fill in all preferences, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or in practice, if you fill in all except 1, if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, your vote will always remain in the count assigned to one of the options. It might move around, but it remains in. Because what we do is, when we look at the, for example, on the screen that's up there, legalisation and regulation, 6 people gave it their number 1. We know legalisation and regulation isn't going to win the race. It's at the bottom of it's the last runner. It's going to be knocked out. So we've got 6 votes that people have given a first preference to legalisation and regulation. We then look at each of those 6 and we see what's their second preference. So if somebody said, my first preference is legalisation, if I don't get that, I want tolerance. We then put that vote on top of the pile for tolerance. That adds to the vote for tolerance. And in this case, 5 out of the 6 of them did go for tolerance. The catch is, if they didn't put a number 2 on their vote, they only put a number 1 on, no number 2, then we can't add their vote to any of the other piles. I can't just make up, oh, I think they probably meant tolerance, because it makes sense to me. So they go into the non-transferable, which means their vote no longer actually plays a part in the election. It counted on the first count, and it was used to determine whether their option got a majority or stayed in a running. Now that it's out of the running, if they haven't given a second preference, and this applies to all elections, if you're voting for the president, if you're voting for your local TD or your local councillor, if you only put a first preference vote on, you're voting for that person, but you're not giving any indication of how you would like your vote to continue if that person's knocked out. And that's exactly what happens here. Where we can, if somebody has given us an indication of their preferences and we say, right, your first preference is out, but your second choice is still in, we'll add your vote to the second choice. And that's where the non-transferable comes in.
And I guess I also wanted to ask...
okay, just last one. I'm trying to get some other people.
Oh yeah, I'll be brief. I also wanted to ask as well, because for the first one there about cannabis, that was incredibly tight,
yes,
and none of them actually reached the quota, whereas for some of them they very much surpassed the quota. I guess obviously this, like, how is that going to be represented, because one represents a very tight race where like literally only one, there's only one, like, you know, outstanding vote being the one that decides which one gets passed. Like, would that be reflected, and should that be reflected?
Well, you could certainly, my suggestion on that was that you would put some comment in the narrative of the report to indicate that this was an extremely tight vote.
This detail would be in the report.
Yeah.
This detail would be in it.
It's not unusual in votes where you've a relatively low number of voters, where we get, well, even in general elections, you'll sometimes get, there was one in Cork a couple of years ago that went on for weeks because every time they counted the votes, they came up with a different number. But in a small, relatively small number, like 100 people, it's not unusual that you would end up with a close vote.
No?
So I'm still struggling to understand why the status quo was an option on this, because at the very start, the first vote we did was to eliminate the status quo. And as we're seeing here, it's having a big impact on second and third count. So can you help me with that?
I can come in there if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can explain that, Noel. The status quo in stage 1 of the vote was to decide whether or not the status quo for all drugs should be recommended, right? So it was that universal approach to all drugs, and that was clear in the voting on stage 1, is that should the status quo for all drugs be retained or eliminated? So it was eliminated as an approach to all drugs. And now the reason it's included again in this stage is because it could be part of a hybrid solution for certain drugs. For example, all other drugs might remain the status quo, whereas there could have been a change for cannabis or cocaine or any one So it is a valid option within that hybrid approach, and that's why it is reintroduced as a legitimate option within this part of the process.
The other point I would make to add to that, it actually doesn't have the effect you think it has. Because if we took status quo off the ballot paper for the option that you're looking at here, there was 10 people gave a first preference to status quo, and they gave their second, 3 of those gave their second preference. Sorry, those 10 people, beg your pardon, they, when they were eliminated, 7 of those 10 gave their second preference to comprehensive health-led. That's where the option went. Those 7 people, if there was no status quo on the paper, would have just given their first preference to comprehensive health-led, because by giving it their second there, it means it's their best option after status quo. So the fact that it's taken until the 4th count for their votes to be added to a different pile just delays that addition. It doesn't actually change the outcome. It just delays it. If you removed status quo, all of the voters who would have voted for status quo would now just give their second, what would have been their second preference would be their first, and it would just get counted a little quicker in the process.
And if I could just add, Noel, if you think about it, so option A, status quo, was as a universal solution removed in voting stage 1, but options B, C, D and E as universal solutions were also excluded in voting stage 2. So each and every one of those as a universal solution in that first past the post measure was excluded either at stage 1 or stage 2, and they all get reintroduced in stage 3 as a potential hybrid approach.
Can I check any other technical questions just in terms of process and outcome? Okay, okay, it's okay. Just behind you.
A very technical question, but for the cannabis vote, were the votes recounted?
Yes, the votes were double counted.
Okay.
Yes.
No, thanks. Zain, come on.
So, sorry, just not about the vote here, but general policy questions. I know we have a slightly different policy for the cannabis at the moment, and does it mean that after this vote, and the policy for all type of drug are moving to uniform, including the current policy, like the cannabis legal, like changing the existing one, the status quo to all uniform ones?
So the way I would explain that, Zin, is if the government does decide to legislate along the lines of this recommendation for a health-led approach or a comprehensive health-led approach, it will have implications for other pieces of legislation like the adult caution scheme that exists. So yes, there will be that adult caution that kind of is available for first-time cannabis offenders at the moment will logically change once there's a new legislation introduced.
Is that possible that the policy is going to be a fairly loose policy to a more strict policy for this type of drug?
I think now the details have to be worked out by the Oireachtas. If they decide to follow the recommendation of the Assembly, a lot of the details will have to be worked out by the elected representatives in the Oireachtas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zain. Okay. On that basis, I'm going to just take it that you've had a deliberation at your table in relation to ballot paper 3. I should say I've asked the team to give you out ballot papers 4, 5 and 6, so at least you have a look ahead in terms of some ballot papers. But I'm just reverting back to ballot paper 3 now, and we still have to ballot on ballot paper 2. Or sorry, ballot paper 1. We still have to ballot on ballot paper 1. Yeah? Just take the screen down. Okay, so can I, while we're getting the ballot paper ready for ballot paper 1, yeah, ready? Gonna try have the discussion now around ballot paper 3. So table, Marie. Okay, folks, can we just tune in? We're having the discussion on table 3. Or sorry, on ballot paper 3.
On ballot paper 3, our table.
Sorry, folks. Sorry, can we do just? Sorry, Simon, can we just there's people. Go ahead.
On ballot paper 3 from 3.1 to 3.5, we at the table here think that 3.5 really hits the nail on the head. And we feel that that really should be the number 1. Thank you.
And Marie, just so I clarify, do you feel you should drop the others?
No.
Okay.
But that's the leader of the pack.
Okay, so you think it should be start with that one?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And maybe amalgamate some of the others into it, but that particular statement is the strongest, and we believe at the table that it's the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. It's clear enough. Okay, table 7.
Thank you. Sorry now. Oh, yeah. Drugs, 3.2, drugs misuse as a policy priority. The explanatory narrative is one long sentence covering 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. My suggestion is the last part of that sentence, and requires a whole of government and whole of society response, is very important. So therefore, a full stop should be placed after the words wider society, and a new sentence which reads, this requires a whole of government and whole of society response, just to strengthen the impact of the final part of that long sentence.
Okay. Can I just urge, and let's look at that. If we do get lost in all the individual narratives and full stops, we've lots of time to be able to do that. We really want to keep up at the high level of what the recommendation is. But look, I have a noted here. So, yeah, please. Table 10.
So it's just for 3.5. It says that a cabinet committee should consider a detailed report on drug trends and emerging risks. At our table, we were just thinking that it should consider and also have that report published, just to the public, so increase transparency and hopefully
Publications report.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Clear. I just missed the first bit. Table 5.
Chair, I've been asked to ask the question on behalf of the table. 3.9, they would like to add an inclusion, so it should read, or the table would like it to read, government should work with key service user stakeholders to build an effective whole society response to drug-related issues. So to include the words service users.
Okay.
Have I captured that correctly?
Key service users.
Is that okay?
Key service users.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to come back to you on all these, yeah. So, okay.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just on 3.2, the headline is government should prioritise drug misuse as a policy priority. That's just a statement. What we'd like to add to that is as part of an overall socio-economic strategy, to add to that, to make it more robust, and that there's a bit of accountability added to it.
Okay.
I leave that up to you how to
I'll
put
come
that.
back to it. Okay. So I'm going to take one more and just going to test the room then, and a few actually. I'll take 2 more. Table 12 first. You have the mic.
Yeah, sorry. Just on 3.1, given the lack of urgency shown in the implementation of legislation, I'm wondering whether it should include at the end, including legislative change implementation.
Can I just clarify this? 3.1, yeah?
Yeah, it says the state should take urgent, decisive and ambitious action to improve its response to the harmful impacts of drug use, including the necessary legislative changes.
Okay,
Something
I'm clear.
or some wording in that line.
Yeah, I'm clear. I understand. Okay, John, one more, and I just want to test the room on a few.
Why don't we appoint a drug czar who has the budget and the responsibility for delivering, rather than just farming this out to individual departments who will shrug their shoulders and say, well, it's not really our fault, it's their fault.
Okay. Okay. Just test the room on a few things. Do you want to make comment on the drugs are?
Yeah, well, on the question of a drug czar, I think that it's a suggestion that might have been made earlier in the process. The idea that has emerged most strongly is the idea that there would be a whole of government approach to it, and there's a recommendation in there at the moment that this would be escalated at the highest levels to a cabinet committee chaired by the Taoiseach and senior officials group. and there is a lot of evidence we have from the feedback and the roundtable discussions over the process that that's by far the most prominent proposition coming from the members. There hasn't been a lot of propositions coming, to be honest with you, John, around drugs are.
And just...
No one takes responsibility.
Yeah.
We see this continually with the Children's Hospital, we see it with Lewis, everything. So one person responsible, a programme of delivery to us, not the Cabinet, to us, the citizens.
But just on John, I'm going to give you a view and we'll test it in the room as well. I think Orla Quinn, if you remember her presentation at the last time, she advocated there's not one single agency you can drive a complex problem, but you needed to bring it to the highest level of government. And that, I'm only saying to you, I'm telling you, sorry, advising my experience, that is where the rubber hits the road. So it gets a top priority at a political. You could potentially have an appointed czar flying solo without getting the political weight behind them. So that's my experience of driving reform in the civil service and public service. I do want to test some of these. I'm not ruling out, that's just a view. Jack, one more, and I want to test these with the audience. Last one.
Table 2 as a recommendation, recommendations 3.4. It says the government should publish a new iteration of the National Drug Strategy as a matter of urgency, and it says that the first draft should be published by the end of 2024. The first draft. We believe at this table that this date is too late and that possibly this should be amended to June 2024 for the first draft of the new National Drug Strategy.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Okay, just going to test the room and a few here now. So first of all, 3.5, there's a view that it needs to become more prominent and pulled up to the top of these set of recommendations. Just a quick show of hands. Everybody agreed in terms of that it should be placed up more prominent? Okay, we'll do that. Second, again, was on 3.2. It was a suggestion of a greater explanation in the narrative and change it, and I'll ask Colin and the team to look at that. But again, I'm trying to keep on the big ones. 3.5 was that we include publication of the report. Sorry, is everybody okay with that? That we would reference publication report? Quick show of hands, please. Okay, we'll do that. 3.9 reference including service users. Who's all those in favour of including that? So it would be service users and stakeholders. All those in favour? Just keep the hands up for a second, please. Okay. Okay. Yeah, fine. We will do that. And 3.2 suggestion came as part, we should include as part of a wider overall socio-economic strategy or something to that impact. All those in favour, please. Quick show of hands. Yeah, okay, that's clear enough. 3.1 that we would include reference, also including the necessary legislation. In 3.1. Including implementing necessary legislative changes. Carl's much better at this than me. All those in favour of that? Okay, carried. And then, I'm just going to go 3.4 first. Reference to change from end of 24 to June 24. All those in favour of making that change? Yeah, that's strong. The issue of who believes we should put in a recommendation to appoint a drug czar. I'm testing the room. This is not a ballot right now. All of those, we'll make those changes. Can I test the room? Who believes the appointment of a drug czar should be a recommendation? Okay, not carried. Thank you. Okay, look, thanks very much for that. Go ahead. Apologies. Go ahead. Okay, Zain, 1 second. 1 second. Zain, just 1 second.
Sorry. 3.5.
We got that, yeah. Okay, can you please raise your hand if you want to make a comment and we'll get a mic. Zain, did you want to make a comment? No? Okay, and then...
Sorry, Paul and Cahill, I didn't want to be rude, and just I had some questions and they could be easily clarified. And first is 3.8 that it mentioned drug policy design and implementations should be informed by service user and people who use drugs, but in the exploratory narrative, and it also said as well as family members of people affected by drugs, and should be added the family members as well. And the second one is if you could clarify that the 3.1, that is a high-level explanation narrative, that the action, and the 3.2 is the misuse policies, and it seems like a very high-level summarization of 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, and 7 and 8. So could you please clarify what are the emphases and the difference between 1 and 2 and the rest of them, and can we put some together and make them more, like maybe clean up a little bit? Thanks.
So the first one was 3.8, we're including adding family members, isn't that correct?
Yeah. So that yellow piece there.
Can we just, everybody okay with that we'd add family members to, you got it properly place? Yeah? Hands, quick show of hands, everybody okay with that? Good, thank you.
And so, Zin, can I clarify, you want to understand the difference between 3.1 and 3.2?
Just 1 second, Zin, we get to the mic.
Sorry, yes, I think first is the differences between 3.1 and 2. Actually, it is okay because one is on action, the other one is on policy, and the rest of them, and then 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, and 6, 7, and 8, and they seem like a detailed extension of 3.1 and 3.2. And may I ask, what are the 1 and the 2 emphases about that's different from the rest?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll just try to very briefly describe. So the first one is a high-level statement about it's almost like a mission statement or a statement of expression of the Citizens' Assembly's view that drugs misuse should be treated ambitiously by the state. So it's a high-level, almost like a mission statement. Then as we drill down into putting it as a priority, it's making it a government policy priority is 3.2. 3.3 then and 3.4 and so on get into different areas of government that, so this is calling for policy coherence and operational cohesion and effective leadership. It is in a way an extension of the argument that this should be treated as a priority, but it's an expression, and you arguably could combine it, but it would become a very lengthy recommendation 3.1. And as we get on then, this 3.4 focuses on the strategy itself, and calling for an urgent publication of the next, of the draft of the next strategy. This is political prominence and the role of a cabinet committee and a senior officials group. It's a different part of the equation. They're all different parts of the same proposition, which is that the state's response to drugs misuse and the harmful impacts should be tackled with greater urgency and greater prominence and so on.
Sorry, I know Rebecca was trying to get in on table 8.
Yeah, just a very quick point I'd like to make. It was brought up at a couple of other tables. Possibly it could be inserted on on 3.3 or 3.4 about accountability. I feel very strongly that accountability is ignored within the Oireachtas and Dáil Éireann, and everything is, traditionally issues are kicked down the road. So I really think we need to, as well as mentioning timeframes and action plans and publishing public statements, we need to include accountability somewhere.
Okay, well made.
Thanks. And Rebecca, perhaps it hasn't come across clearly enough, but the accountability mechanism here, I think, appears in 3.5 with the publication of a detailed annual report on drugs, trends and emerging risks that goes to government. So the accountability is an annual detailed report, and elsewhere in the ballot paper actually there's also a financial accountability as well. So I don't know if there's any other language or suggestion.
I think, sorry, Rebecca, if I've got you right, I think it's kind of throughout you want it strengthened, that there is accountability for delivering.
Yeah, I do. I want the actual word accountability with our legislators and politicians. That's just a personal viewpoint, and I can't in all good conscience ignore that.
Yeah, no, and I hear you strongly, and I think it's something we can do if you want to maybe just...
Thank you.
Anna's come up with a proposal here, or somebody has come up with a proposal that Anna's shown me, which reads as follows. And so I don't know, something like that. So publish and consider and publish a detailed annual report on trends and risks and the government's responses to these. Something like that.
Or accountability for government responses. Yeah.
A response isn't the same as accountability. Responses can be empty.
I think there's a strong message from the Assembly at previous meetings as well. We want accountability firmed up. And,
can we put it to the room for a vote?
I don't think we can.
We just need wording.
No. Yeah, we're there. We're all there. We're there. It has to be in there.
It's just a question of finding the word.
So I think it's about accountability to deliver.
I think it might be quite powerful, Paul, if we did have a quick show of hands.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Oh, no, look. Oh, sorry, I bet it's everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, so can we do that?
Certainly
Quick
gets
show of
my
hands.
vote. You can, of course. Who believes we should strengthen the reference to accountability? Well done.
Now, how do we do it?
No, I mean, well done. Now, without just 1 second, I will come to Alana and I know table 12 as well. So just give us a couple of minutes to think and we'll come back on this before we put the ballot papers out. Okay, Alana, I know you had your hand up first here. And then we'll go back to table 12 and then table 4.
In relation to the accountability part, I just presumed that maybe an independent body would be put together like HICWA was for anything kind of HSE. So if it's an independent body that measures the service and gives the proper guidelines rather than the government or the Oireachtas having all the accountability, I think that would potentially work better. I just don't understand why that wasn't considered.
Yeah, and again, it's the SAR or single body, approach.
No, I mean like HICWA, not one person. I mean an independent body.
Yeah. Just give you advice. I think Orla was better explaining this. Here's my view, and we can put this out. This issue of drugs, as you've seen, crosses a number of area departments. There's an education perspective about it. There's a justice perspective about it. There's a health perspective about it. So there's a housing, there's a wider socio-economic perspective about it. I would not dare try simplify that one body will deliver across those. One government minister, one senior accountability at government, which I think is coming through stronger, is a better approach to solve a complex issue like this, in my experience. Yeah, so
the HSE kind of didn't work for them until HICWA came about. So
yeah, just give me a view. So can I just, Rebecca? Sorry, I'm just going to say, thinking on my feet. I'm thinking on my chair here. If we were to put a particular ballot, specific ballot in itself, and this is not the wording, but we'll come up with something specific ballot in itself that the Assembly expects to see accountability assigned and for delivery of implementation of recommendations. Something like that. Everybody in favour? We do about something like that. Okay, right. Quick. That the Assembly believes. Don't quote me on the wording here, Abigail. The Assembly believes that government need to assign accountability for delivery against the actions recommended by the Assembly. Okay? Yeah. No, I think that's, if you're saying government need to do it, accountability, it'll have to be at a very senior level, at government level, I expect. But look, let us craft something. Sorry, we'll do something on that. Table 12. Sorry, apologies.
Hi, sorry, just on 3.6, it says involvement in implementing the next iteration of the National Drug Strategy. Should that just not be implementing iterations of National Drug Strategies in general, rather than just the next one? And
I think that makes sense.
On the point relating to June 2024, just as again, my understanding is our recommendations have to go to a committee and then be approved, and then later on it would be implemented. So I just asked the question whether June 24 is a realistic date. It does show our need for urgency, but in terms of the likely timelines, is it a realistic date?
Well, there is potentially nothing stopping the publication of a report in conjunction with going through our process in the Oireachtas, So I think it's worthwhile just putting the pressure on it. So,
sorry, I'm just asking a question on behalf of a member of our table. On 3.5, they would like a cabinet committee to be changed to a cross-party committee in order to ensure neutrality.
if I could just come in and explain the difference between a cabinet committee and a cross-party committee. So a cabinet committee is a structure within government, right? And a cross-party committee is a structure within the Oireachtas. They're two kind of different locations, right? So what you're talking about is a joint Oireachtas committee in terms of having a cross-party approach, whereas a cabinet committee is what operates as a subcommittee of the government. So they're two different things, and you can certainly make a recommendation as well about having a cross-party approach within the Oireachtas. That already exists through the joint Oireachtas committee structure. So it's why we didn't include it, because it already does exist.
Yeah, and my advice would be not to weaken the one about a cabinet committee. It's where the rubber hits the road at a government level. Tau 4, Kerry first, and then...
On 3.6 and 3.8, when we're talking about stakeholder involvement and then the service users and others informing it, can we talk about how they're going to be supported and funded to do that, or make some... I know there's a section recommendation around funding, but can we have some sort of wording that acknowledges that they have to be facilitated, supported and funded to do that? Yeah. That their involvement and engagement doesn't just happen, that there has to be provision made and structures put in place to ensure that happens.
Okay. Do you want to make any comment?
Yeah, well, as you said, it does come up later in the balloting process around funding and resources that there would be funding allocated, but we can include it here as well, or propose to include it here as well.
Okay. So Evelyn, one last point, yeah.
Dr. Orla Quinn the last time recommended to us at our table that we include in 3.4 that drug use is on the agenda at that committee meeting quarterly with mandatory attendance from key stakeholders. So I don't know, would that be possible?
Yeah, I wasn't actually when Orla was talking about that. So what we would be recommending is a dedicated cabinet committee on this item, right? So, you know, when you're saying included as an item on the agenda, it would be the agenda that would be meeting on a quarterly basis from the cabinet committee. So sorry. I think what Orla might have been referencing was there is an existing committee that exists of which this can be tabled, and it's not tabled that often. Well, we're saying a new dedicated committee or dedicated.
Okay, I think it might be best to specify that then in the cabinet committee references is a dedicated cabinet committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that way you get your point of it addressed. So dedicated and that thing. Ciara, one more.
Okay. Sorry, at the risk of frustrating everyone here with another question, we just had a view at the table that we thought that the recommendations were going to be in the region of 6 to 10. And we're just wondering here, like these are all valid recommendations, but how do we get to a point where we prioritise, that we ensure that government don't cherry pick, maybe which ones to get through? Do we have a process at the end once we've agreed all of these recommendations? Could you talk to that, please? Thanks.
Thanks, Ciara. I agree with you. I mean, there was various numbers. Each table at the end of the last meeting was asked their view about how many recommendations. I think we'd started off with a lowball number of 5 to 10. The consensus around the room seemed to be in the region of 20. For most of the tables at the last meeting, there seemed to be a view that around 20 was the right number. In reality, when push came to shove, as we described, whittling down 1,500 propositions down to 20 proved beyond our ability. So we've ended up in the region of, I think, 30. It's still significantly under the level of recommendations made by most previous citizens' assemblies. Whether there's an opportunity to streamline or not, I don't know. But to go to your question, like if we can live with 30 being the number, there isn't really, I don't think, a risk of the government cherry picking. As I said, they will have to go through an exercise in transparency and accountability when they publish their response to each and every one of the recommendations. And that's what they've committed to in the terms of reference. So I know it keeps coming up, how do we ensure that the government doesn't ignore the first half of the recommendations and only implement the second half? The answer is they do have to give what's called a reasoned, considered response to each and every one of the recommendations.
Okay, I'm going to draw us into a point here now to try and move us on. If there is one more pressing question. No. No, right at the back. Yeah.
This is on behalf of the table, who wanted to reiterate strongly that they would like some kind of independent oversight of any cabinet committee or any structure that was to drive this forward.
Well, look, the question around the cabinet committee, independent oversight of a cabinet committee, like ultimately a cabinet committee is made up of the government who's elected by the people. So, I mean, ultimately this will be an exercise in, government policy, reflecting and capturing what the people of the country want. I mean, that's the ultimate level of accountability. But there will be also a national oversight committee. It already exists for the current strategy. What's missing at the moment is the relationship between that National Oversight Committee upwards into the political system. So the creation of a new Cabinet Committee on Drugs is that oversight of what exists already.
Move Zane, really last one, please.
Sorry, just one quick suggestion on 3.5. Can we change the passive phrase and make it active? So we say, for example, supported by, and change it to the body who is going to support and who must support. And also, when we talked about the senior official group and assign the accountability to the senior official group, and can we publish the body and a specific person or group, the name of the, and along with the report? Thank you.
And the Cabinet Committee would be specified if it is agreed that there's a Cabinet Committee?
And a more detailed individual or group, is it possible?
Cabinet Committee is chaired by the Taoiseach, if it's a dedicated, if our recommendation was agreed.
Yeah, and as long as that's part of the report and be published, and rather than a senior official group, and that would be great.
That would be the that would be the outcome. If
Yeah.
our agreement, the Taoiseach would be the chair, nominated person to chair it, and the senior officials group would reflect the various departments.
Thank you. And just one suggestion, if we could rephrase the passive to active, please. That would be more powerful, I suppose.
Particulars then?
Sorry.
Which
like,
passive?
For example, we have the passive phrase, right? Supported by a senior group of a senior official group, and can we change it to a senior officials group supports something? And also the last, the Department of Health must be supported in providing effective leadership and coordination of the work of the National Oversight Committee. And can we rephrase it to active? Who is supporting the Department of Health? So just the expression thing. Thanks. And also, one quick question is, if people vote for 3.5, does it mean people automatically agree for 3.2? And if someone votes disagree and agree contradiction for 3.2 and 3.5, and is that considered valid? That's all my questions. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to test the room just on the second one. Do we want to reflect a more passive or active instead of passive, or we just where that stands at a minute? Is everybody happy where it stands, or do you want to reflect something more passive? Is everybody happy where it stands? Just quick show of hands. 3.5 with the change we go. Okay, we're going to leave that one. Okay, just the one piece we need to come back to you on when we have time is the greater accountability ballot papers to put out. So just leave that with us. On that basis, I'm going to quick show of hands. Everybody, with the change that we've made here in real time, if everybody's happy that we will get that ballot paper ready for you now for ballot paper 3. Okay, quick show of hands. Thank you very much for working through us.
A line by line vote?
No, okay. We'll just bring the ballot paper.
Yeah.
Ballot.
Okay.
So we will get that. What I'm proposing now is we have ballot paper 1 ready for you now to vote on. We're going to distribute ballot paper 1, and can we also distribute 4, 5 and 6 out to everybody? Yeah. So ballot paper 1, we're going to just get you to this, what we went through earlier.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's okay.
Okay, Jesse and Marcus again. Jesse and Marcus, if we can get you again, please. Sorry.